Creepypasta. Alright, no, I'm not doing this intro again. I'm sure you know what creepypasta is, and if you don't, hey, feel free to click on my previous video where I went over one of the most popular creepypasta webcomic dub. Today, I will be talking about two comics that, while they didn't gain as much popularity as I Eat Pasta for Breakfast, were still pretty notable. Those comics being the story of Creepy Frozen Pasta and the story of the Seer. Spooky here, and unlike my last video, I haven't seen or read these comic dubs, so this will definitely be an interesting, but hopefully not as bad as last time, experience. These comics were recommended me in the comments of my last video, which I'm already recommending you to do. Haha. You know, you get it? I genuinely do love hearing about stupid niche internet or fandom topics, either from your childhood or something you came across. Also, maybe like or subscribe too, just saying. Before I start, I should clarify I am not a creepypasta expert. I've been in the fandom for a short amount of time when I was younger and know next to nothing about all that lore, besides comments I received on my last video. So feel free to correct or take my commentary with a little grain of salt. Let's start with the story I'm most familiar with. It was also the most popular out of these comics, with a whopping 2 million views on the dub, that being Creepy Frozen Pasta, or the story of Annie the White. Creepy Frozen Pasta was made by Annabelle YouTube, and sorry if I said that wrong, or as she was known when the comic came out, Lost White. Before we get into her story, I want you to keep in mind that Annie is no longer a creepypasta. Years after the comic, the creator released a video talking about her experience in the past with the creepypasta fandom. She made some pretty good points that the creepypasta fandom has a tendency to claim these characters as their own, that are pretty much just other people's OCs. She talked about the hate she got for having something that resembles OCX canon, and not for the hate than the overwhelming instance on more chapters in comics, which eventually led to her dropping it. The same thing that happened with I Eat Pasta for Breakfast, since I forgot to mention that last time. When she left, she was upset to leave Annie, but years later, she took her back, redesigning her and using her in her current story, or a past story. This video is from 3 years ago, but I hope that the creator found use for her, and I'm happy she could take it back. One last thing, I will only be covering what's on her YouTube, since everything else seems to be completely wiped, like her old DeviantArt, Instagram, Twitter, etc. If you do find her socials, please do not harass her or show her this video, because I'm sure this isn't the happiest thing to look back on. Same with any creepypasta dub I talked about. Oh, and because I couldn't find her pronouns, I'm just using she, her, because what I've seen, people generally use that to refer to her. Like all good creepypastas, we start out with a writing from a friend of Annie's, stating that she was in distress from a camping trip she just got back from earlier. Starting from the beginning, Kate, our protagonist, is getting ready to go on a camping trip in the winter with the couple Stephen and Margaret? Hold on. Yeah, I got it right. It was Margaret. Editing spooky here. How the fuck did I mess that up? Who set up the camping trips, as well as Jake, who is a classic douchebag, nice to his friends, but an absolute dick to women. Jake has been dating Annie for a couple of months and decided to take her with him. Although he was definitely not an ideal partner, even flirting with other girls, and everyone knew. Once Annie leaves to use the bathroom, Jake tells Kate that things aren't going great with them, saying after this trip he's calling quits, which fair enough pissed Kate off. Stephen even joins in, agreeing with Kate. Jake gets defensive, and then Annie walks out as they all get into the car. I think it's Annie. I'll probably switch up between the two, sorry. Meeting their guide, they explain things and give hints to nice spots, as well as mentioning a fireworks show that was happening later that night. Reaching their campsite, they set up their tents and got comfortable. After the three girls looked for a spot to watch the fireworks, they talked about Annie and Jake's relationship. Annie even acknowledged that it wouldn't last, but still had feelings for Jake, even when Jake would get incredibly angry, something she is no longer fazed by. Going back back, and after a few drinks, which Ani and Kate sat out for, her alarm went off for the fireworks show. Steven, Jake, and Ani went ahead to their spot while Kate stayed with Margaret for a bit, who was sick from the alcohol consumption. Before they could head that way, they noticed Steven and Jake running towards them. They didn't say anything as Kate asked where Ani was. As they looked terrified, they said she just, quote, disappeared. They went back to the lodge to report that Ani was missing. The search was useless as the snow got worse. After stopping at a rest stop, they agreed to stop driving until the snow cleared up a bit. Jake left as he went out into the woods to piss. After a while, he came back telling Steven to drive urgently. After a bright white light and a crash of the car, which led to the car door being completely torn off, checking the woods, they found Jake completely withered away, frozen, like he'd been there for years. After calling the police, they were taken to the hospital. Jake is dead and Ani is still missing. That's where the beginning of this story ends. Starting the actual comic dub itself, Ani hears a voice claiming her as theirs. She then wakes up, Jack standing there and waiting for her to wake up. Ani asks where she is, and Jack tells her she's at Slenderman's place. She says she doesn't know who that is, and Jack basically calls her dumb. Slenderman shows up and tells Jack he's excused. He tells her he brought her to this place because she seemed like she could use some assistance. Asking him if he knows what she is, Tiki, Toby, Masky, and Hoodie enter the scene, in which Twinkification got them once again. Slenderman asks how their, what I'm assuming is a mission, went, which was poorly. Toby introduces himself as well as Masky and Hoodie. In return, and Ani does the same, asking to use the shower, and Slenderman gives her the A-OK. As soon as she gets out of the shower, Jack bursts into the room, yelling at her about using the hot water. Seeing she's in her towel, she screams, and we cut to dinner where they're both embarrassed and flustered. Ooh. After some witty dialogue over pasta, Ani explains that she needs to drain human souls to survive, or else she turns into a mindless corpse called a husk. Slenderman asks who made her, and she says she doesn't know, only hearing bits and pieces of a voice like at the start. Trying to get away from the voice because it eventually began to become painful, she ended up in the forest where Slenderman found her. Slenderman explains that her desires have been interfering with whoever is trying to control her, saying he sensed it when he found her. Because of this desire being so strong, it caused a mental interference, which was the cause of Ani's discomfort. Slenderman's own influence as a operator adding on to that, which is why it became so much for her, making her collapse. Slenderman goes to explain that if she wanted to stay there with them, they have to break her free of the connection with her creator. Toby assures her Slenderman can do it, and Slender goes on to say he'll work on suppressing her headaches and her discomfort. And in return, he'll assign her a mentor to go on missions. Ani thanks him, and because of a passive comment Jack makes, Slender makes him Ani's mentor, giving them a mission tomorrow. Cutting to tomorrow's mission, Jack goes over those romance rules that's supposed to add a little bit of a conflict to the love interest, you know, all that bullshit. Their mission is to go and kill some high schoolers that were poking around, and they do just that. Despite those silly rules, they have a little bit of bonding. Jack telling her she'd even be good on her own. Going back, Ani rushes to her room. Jeff drops a small misogynistic comment that, or he's a little fruity, and Jane rightfully throws a book at him, going to talk to Ani. Jane comes into Ani's room, apologizing for Jack saying something dumb. Ani opens up to Jane and explains that she was alright with being alone, but dying alone was the worst because it was by someone who she loved, and she'd prefer not to be anymore. Jane walks out to see Jack eavesdropping, and they have a silly back and forth, Jane saying if Jack can't handle it, they switch, and Slenderman pops up as always upon hearing his name, telling Jane he can't do that because he believes Jack and Ani can learn a lot from each other. If he is wrong though, he will just reassign her. Slender saying that if he can't free her mind completely, sending her off wouldn't be enough and they may have to kill her. Ani of course listens to this whole conversation from inside her bedroom. Jack eventually talking about how he came close to being killed by Slender and how he doesn't wish the same fate for her. We get a time skip skip to a few weeks later, and we cut to Slender, who exclaims he's having difficulty tracking the influence on Annie. A knock on his door, Hoodie and Masky come in, telling Slender they didn't find anything out of the ordinary. They ask why they're doing this, and Slender mentions that another operator could be lurking by, that being Annie's operator, or I guess influence, telling them not to question his orders. Back to Jack and Annie, we see as they bond and their relationship develops. Annie confesses hearing the conversation about killing her, saying that while it scared her, she understood. Annie's headache returns as she screams, saying it's stronger. Jack holds onto her as they walk off, leaving behind Husk. Slender says that she should rest, and he should have known that something was off since keeping her episodes at bay was just too easy. Jack leaves as the others worry about the situation. Jack has an edgy breakdown and then sees the horde of Husk running back to the mansion. They fight the Husk, finding out that they're pretty strong and just a blow to the head won't do much damage. Slenderman comes out and upon seeing the Husk, connects who they're exactly dealing with or who's influencing Annie. Slender yells at them and they gain motivation as intense anime music plays in the background. It's revealed that the person they are dealing with is called the Necromancer as he speaks through the husks. Slenderman thinking he was gone a long time ago. The Necromancer calls Annie a disappointment and says she's no longer of use to him, telling Slender to do with her as he pleases. Annie has her main character moment as she reaps the husk of their souls, taking them back. Jack catches her as she faints, and before the Necromancer can continue his evil speech, my lesbian awakening comes and crushes the last husk's head. Jack and Annie get closer physically and emotionally as they head back to the mansion. We go to the Necromancer's point of view as he tells someone to capture her, telling them it'll be easier now since Slender thinks she's useless to him. And that ends the dub of Creepy Frozen Pasta. Is what I would say if I didn't find a Russian dub that led me to find the hidden unlisted English dubs of season 2 that was discontinued. We start back up a month later after the Husk attack, never seeing or hearing any sign of the Necromancer again. In the month, Annie suffered through Slenderman's treatment, being chained up and assaulting her mind daily to break the influence and strengthen her from mental attacks. We watch as Slender unchains her, telling her to clean herself up and get rest since they have a big day tomorrow. Coming back to the mansion, Sally runs up to her, hugging her. They have a sweet moment and Jane comes by telling her to rest. Entering her room, she sees clothes and a note, that note being from Jack since he got clothes for her. Lo and behold, he's in the doorway and sitting down by her bed, she thanks him. Jack hugs her and says he's sorry. Annie starts to cry and they have a lighthearted moment as they blush. And then we get this scene and I'm sorry. I like them together, but this shit is so cringe, man, especially straight couples. Jeff interrupts them before they can kiss, which Jack is incredibly upset by. After a shower, Annie goes to bed, and we cut to the guy we saw the Necromancer talking to earlier, and he's grateful that things will end tomorrow. We get his name, Damien, from Slenderman's brother, as he tells him to go rest. We see someone in a tree talking to Damien about tomorrow's plans, her being the escape. Back to Annie, she's nervous since the event is formal, but Jane assures her they'll be closed when they get there. Jeff complains about going since it's just a quote dumb operator meeting. Jane points out that he doesn't want to go just because he doesn't want to see Nina. Nina being Jeff's fangirl. Apparently in her original story she was meant to be with Jack, but it kind of got rewritten by someone else. I don't know. I only know the one where she is Jeff's fangirl, so if someone has a link to the other one, hand over. Slender exclaims he's not excited either to see his brother, Splendor. Annie asks how they're getting there, and Slenderman explains he's using an ability to warp them to the location. Easily enough, they do it and arrive. After a quick explanation of how the mansion works and how no one finds them, we get to meet the other white, or as we know, Damien. Damien comes off strong, and Jack obviously gets jealous jealous, and of course continues to be. And I don't know, I just think they should just like kiss or something. Slender and Splendor take off as everyone else goes and changes. We watch as they enter the meeting with other operators, seeing more of Slender Man's brothers, even the pedo. Starting the meeting, Splendor makes sure that the girl Mara relays the information to what I assume is other operators, and Trender wants the meeting to go quickly as he points out another person in the room not wanting to be near him. Slender asks if they've met before, and taking down his hood, it's revealed to be Zoggo, which, you know, I'm rocking with this human design much more than the other one. While they agree they don't like Zoggo being there, the necromancer does pose a serious threat. We see Nina as she looks around in what I'm assuming is a ballroom for Jeff. Jeff crawls out from underneath the table, telling everyone to shut up with the fear of Nina hearing them. But it's too late as Nina finds him. Jack complains to Jane as he's very obviously jealous. Jane leaves, done with Jack's bullshit. After Sally begs for Ben to dance with her, which he complies, Damien gets flirty, again asking her to dance. Jack interrupts this, telling Ani they need to talk. Out on the porch, they actually have some communication, and Ani wanting to get to know another white, and Jack communicating his suspicions. And honestly, I'm really glad that they didn't go for the miscommunication trope with this conversation, and it really makes you root for them more, even though it's hard to root for them because the story already does so, but I'll talk about that later. Damien later interrupts them, sneakily freezing the door. Jack, going to shake his hand, gets it frozen over. He shoots him back and freezes Jack in place as he grabs Ani with his hand formed from ice. The others notice the noise and have trouble as they try to break the door. The girl from earlier turns into a bird of sorts and takes off, Damien getting away with Ani. Jack breaks out, explaining that he took Ani. Now that is where the story of creepy frozen pasta ends. I went into this with higher expectations after, and honestly, they were pretty much met. The story knew where it was going, and things weren't just happening. Also, the actual creepypasta format at the start definitely helped you get immersed. The only problem I even had with the writing was that it wasn't super clear on Jake killing Ani. It's hinted at by her dad asking him what he did, but his acting has to be good for him to be full-on terrified and sobbing, as well as Steven defending him. Or else Steven was in on it, but he never had a problem with Ani. It was still a good classic creepypasta, and I recommend listening to it if that stuff is up your alley. For the comic dub itself, while it didn't have perfect writing, it was still enjoyable. These voices were a little silly, but it kind of fits for having been made in like 2017. The dynamic between the characters was clear, and it was clear that while Slenderman was a relatively kind boss, he was still a boss and wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty per se. The story knew when it was a good time to be a little silly and be serious, and how to transition one to another. Plus, the introduction to the more original characters was well done, and they just didn't immediately pop up, instead having a place in the story. I will say that the dialogue could be a bit wonky, especially with Ani and Jack. It just seemed awkward.
What the fuck is wrong with me? Pathetic. Keep it together. I didn't sign up for this. It's not my goddamn problem. Why the hell am I so pissed off?
The character designs could be better, at least at the beginning, especially since everyone has slimmed body types and literally not a peak of different hair. Everyone was also paper white except for Zoggo. Yes, counting Jack and Damien as white, because look at these fuckers. He's definitely a cracker in this. They also kind of failed hyping up how powerful the necromancer is because we never hear anything of his powers other than controlling the husk. but to give them the benefit of the doubt, it was discontinued. Yes, same goes for I eat pasta for breakfast. One of my biggest issues was Jack and Ani's whole thing. The ship wasn't bad at all, and I definitely see why people shipped it, especially since the artist did hype it up. Because they did, especially in the comic, it kind of fell flat. After not seeing her for a literal month, they almost kiss, and it wasn't built up to because like a month is a long time, and I feel like they should have had something like the conversation on the balcony to hype up a kiss. Personally, to me, the ship kinda tasted like unseasoned chicken. Sorry to reveal I'm one of those wokies. Everything's gotta be a little homoerotic or else it's just not good. Besides that, it was pretty alright. The artists, you can tell, at least with season 1, that they enjoyed making it, and so did the people working on it. Even having some blooper stuff, which was also fun looking back on. Even if Ani is no longer a creepypasta, I respect her character and how the artist is making use of her and other projects. The Seer was created by Madame Macabre, I think it is, on YouTube, and while content has slowed down, she is still active on YouTube and seemingly still having an interest in creepypasta. But her main passion now seems to be music, with the first video about the Seer being auditions in 2013, also being Madame's first YouTube video. At least appears to be. After they announced a hiatus, it was, never really talked about again. Starting the comic, you get the classic introduction of our main character, her name being Corbin Jumping Eagle. She goes on a monologue mentioning that she is Sioux, which is a Native American tribe more commonly in North and South Dakota, from what I've seen. This is where she gets the last name Jumping Eagle. We move on and she talks about how ever since she was little she could see things, these being like little creatures, and she says she copes with it, not exactly mentioning how, but sometimes it's unavoidable. She never struggled with it until her grandmother passed away and gave her an old book. Because she was afraid to open it, she kept it under her bed. Of course, she opens it, which causes an episode of sorts. Cutting to a little sneak peek of Zalgo, we see someone inform him that the Seer has awakened, and he requests she's brought to him. Corbin goes to bed afterwards, but is abruptly wakened by a voice telling her to wake up. This voice being Jeff's. Seeing him, Corbin screams, hitting him with a pillow for a bit. Jeff has enough, telling her to shut up and listen. He grabs her hand and puts a ring on, telling her it's a powerful talisman and to not take it off. Jeff says he doesn't have time to explain and tells her to hide in the closet. Corbin complies, thinking this is just a dream. Jeff goes into her bed and hides under the covers. When trying to confront him, there's a rumble and she goes back into the closet. One of Zalgo's minions of sorts comes by and Jeff surprises them and kills them. Corbin freaks out and Jeff tells her to follow him. Once Jeff says he saved her life, she's strangely complicit and apologizes. Jeff comments they should be able to make it before his boss loses his patience, only to have Masky show up saying it's too late for that. Who is a twink again. I was promised a chubby man from the Marble Hornets fans and I need him. It's all I want. I thought I eat pasta for breakfast Masky was bad, but that was fucking mercy. Sadly, I don't think I'm going to get it from any early 2010s creepypasta content, since this seems to be a pattern back then. Everyone portrays him as this soft and nice twink of a man compared to what I see today. I shouldn't be too surprised since Marble Hornets aren't even correlated to creepypasta and people just added Masky and Hoodie for the Slender Man mansion concept. Both Masky and Hoodie were even against the operator or that universe's Slender Man, but I'm assuming that since it was back then and not all the tapes were released, people assumed it was the other way around. This is just information I've gotten from my comments, so correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, and we also get a whole shot of Masky's ass for some reason. Slender Man comes after Masky. Corbin, upon seeing him is shaken in her boots, but Slender does his best to snap her out of it. Also, because Slender Man has no mouth, he uses Masky as a communicator, trusting him since Masky was Slender Man's first proxy. Despite just communicating for him, Masky will also copy Slender's movements, which is definitely an interesting touch. After Fala, her grandmother, passed, Corbin was basically established as the next Seer, skipping a generation because of an accident that her mother got into. With this, Fala hoped that the line of Seers would end, but as we see, that isn't the case. Corbin says it's too much, but Slender tells her that she can't be relieved of her title, and there must always be a Seer or their world will basically crumble. Realizing this, Corbin goes with it. Since Slender was under the impression that Corbin has been aware of her duties, he assigns Jeff to protect her until she learns her abilities and can protect herself, which both aren't happy about since they hate each other. Masky also is there too because he's such a, and I quote from the thousands of comments on these videos, a cinnamon roll. Corbin's alarm goes off and Slender leaves having business in the Underrealm. She leaves to go to college and both Jeff and Masky tag from behind. Upon making it to school, she's exhausted and her friend points out Jeff and Masky standing out the window. Corbin tells them to leave, and upon her friend calling Jeff cute, we get a fun fact thing with hoodie on the side. Basically, proxies of powerful identities can disguise themselves as humans, but because Corbin is a Seer, she can see them for who they really are. Corbin's friend, after a little bantering, points out Masky, whose mask is still visible. Another fun fact talks about how they can't shift material items and only their body to appear human. After Jeff calls him ugly, it causes Masky to run off. Then the bell goes off and Corbin's friend leaves. Jeff, reminding her that she should leave since class is over, runs off to go find Masky, and Corbin goes off to the park for lunch. Corbin notes that being a Seer is a pain, which you literally didn't do anything, but alright. After speaking her thoughts out loud, she's interrupted by someone who introduces herself as Scarecrow and asks Corbin to come with her. Corbin, assuming she's with Slender, tells her that she'll go with her after she finds Jeff. Scarecrow gets mad, bringing out her weapon, and before she can attack, Masky saves the day, pushing her over. Since she's focused on Corbin, she reveals that she's with Zoggo, and she goes for her, allowing Masky to, I guess, teleport, which causes another one of these fun fact things to pop up. And apparently, if a proxy has served their operator for a long time, they eventually pick up things from them on a small scale, which explains Masky's abilities. He kicks her, and then we cut to this. To explain this fucking jump scare, they do these things where the characters and voice actors ask them to like and subscribe, which is fine, but man, why this? How do we go from the Marble Hornets to this? Moving on, Corbin starts crying and Masky starts comforting her, having been in the same spot before. Scarecrow cuts off their sweet moment, and before she has a chance to attack Masky, Jeff shows up, cutting off her arm. After arguing with Masky and Corbin and making a slight misogynistic comment, Scarecrow hits him with the edge of her scythe. Because of that, Jeff charges at her. After the first attack fails, he goes again, in which the fire-off arm of the Scarecrow trips, landing a slice on his stomach. Getting up, attacking once again, he cuts her up a bit, but it doesn't do much since she's not capable of bleeding. Throwing a knife at her, he's able to pin her to a tree by her neck. Finding a lighter, he threatens to light her up. She begs, swearing she was sent against her will. Jeff suggests that Zoggo tricked her into doing his bidding, and she says that's exactly the case. Jeff doesn't care though, but before he can light her up, Corbin stops him. Corbin manages to convince Jeff and tells Scarecrow to explain. She says she'll start from the beginning, and we go back 20 years earlier. She started off being a regular Scarecrow, being put together by a farmer and his son. His son would visit her every day, and even though she wasn't alive, he considered her a friend, and so did Scarecrow. Years passed, and she watched him grow up, and he didn't stop visiting, making her love for him grow. But eventually he he became more distant and even got a girlfriend. She felt anguish as she continued to rot in the field alone. One day he came to visit and talked all about his life, even mentioning his girlfriend that was coming over later that night. He apologized for being too busy to come by, which only angered her as his girlfriend is what kept him busy. She felt consumed by anger, and upon that, Zalgo showed up, demonstrating his power by giving her the ability to speak. He says he can completely free her if she does a favor for him. That favor being to kill his girlfriend and collect her soul, since his powers are limited in the overrealm. He gives her a scythe that'll give her the ability to absorb the soul. If she succeeds, she'll forever be able to move, but if she fails, she'll go back to her same position. She agrees and she's able to move. With this, she takes the scythe and kills her in the field, hanging her body on the same post that she was trapped on. She went to Zalgo and returned the blade, going back to the spot she left his girlfriend. The boy was there and sobbing. The Scarecrow tried to go and comfort him, only for him to be terrified. He freaks out, realizing she did this, and calls her a monster, lighting a corn on fire and threatening her if she doesn't leave. She cries, not understanding, and she runs away back to Zalgo. She's upset with Zalgo and tells him she hates him, but Zalgo points out she has nowhere else left to go. So of course she goes with him for protection, agreeing to do his bidding. We return to the present, and Scarecrow says she isn't proud of her past. Corbin says she can't blame Scarecrow. What they did was wrong, but not enough so that she should die from it. She says the reason she's letting her go is because of the lesson her grandmother taught her, which was that people deserve second chances. Before Scarecrow can drop some grandma lore, we're interrupted by a construction worker. She apologizes, saying they'll leave, but Jeff falls over, slowly bleeding out. We cut to Corbin's apartment where Jeff wakes up, and we see that Scarecrow was even welcomed in. She explains the situation and compliments herself on patching him up. Because of the incident, Masky called Slender, who's not in a good mood because of it. As he shows up, Hoodie is also there. At first communicating for Slender, then he calls over Masky to do it for him. Slender yells at Jeff and says that he would dispose of him if not for having one of Zalgo's top agents, that being Scarecrow. Plus Corbin having taken her first step in being the next Seer by treating Jeff's wounds, healing being one of the most important ability of a Seer because they aren't able to go to something like a hospital. We also found out that monsters live in the overrealm as well, and they have visas too. Slender tells her to then go grab up the book since it'll make things easier to understand, and in the meantime, Hoodie and Masky interact.
Hello, friend. It is good to see you. Is everything well?
The same to you, Hoodie. Yes, Miss Corbin is very kind, and Jeff isn't as bad as he seems.
This is the most inhumane interaction I've ever witnessed. Hoodie asks him if he's had any episodes recently, and it's referenced to. Basically, Hoodie is trying to salvage what's left of his humanity. All that fun, angsty lore stuff. Corbin comes back as their conversation ends. Slenderman also shows up, telling Hoodie to let the council know that he'll be late, which the council, I'm guessing up, are like higher beings, since the Seer stuff is so important. They mentioned that someone else was a Seer and kind of have this dramatic moment after the Slenderman went over stuff from like chapter 2. His name is apparently Lockalear, that Slender and everyone else don't want to encounter since he's dangerous. Corbin then opens the book and reads a letter left from her grandmother. Basically, it just says that each chapter is like a lesson plan and that Zalgo will be looking for her. Her grandma also mentions a safety deposit box, leaving behind a key. She starts crying and clenches the paper. Masky also comes and comforts her for a bit, also talking more about how Jeff murdered his whole family despite saying it's not his place to tell her. He reminds her that they are killers and to be careful. This is where the dub of the Seer ends, but not the comic. Oh no, not just yet. Jesus Christ. Alright, I'm speedrunning this. So basically, they talk about the Lockalear character, who even has a comic of his own, but this video is long enough. Corbin doesn't think if he was the Seer, he could possibly be that bad, but we're proven wrong with a torture scene from his point of view. Jeff tries to leave again, but Slender tells him he has to stay since Masky isn't strong enough, and he doesn't exactly trust Scarecrow. Overall, it's just a parent scolding a child. After a small conversation with Scarecrow, Slender says he must be going to see the council, telling Corbin that she needs to start studying the first lesson and master it in a week, the same amount of time as the other lessons. He leaves and she sets up sleeping arrangements for both Masky and Scarecrow, Jeff leaving to go murder someone. We see some bonding between Corbin and Scarecrow, and finally, this is where the story of the Seer ends. Chat, guys, I don't know. Like, it wasn't bad per se, but I came out of it with relief. Maybe it's because this video is so fucking long and I just lost hours upon hours of my life to rewatch this and to comment on it and explain it. I think it genuinely was a really cool concept, and I genuinely really did like Corbin, Scarecrow, and Jeff, and nearly all his banter with the other characters. But I think what really threw me off was Masky. Like, I've never seen such a violent mischaracterization. I'm not even into Marble Hornets, and I know damn well this is not the same man from those tapes. I might even start Marble Hornets just to fucking cleanse my soul of whatever interpretation was that. The thing is, I think the Seer is actually pretty good, especially for its time. Like, the parts that are bad are more bad in a nostalgic way. I think if you just remove or change Masky's personality, I would have and still would eat this shit up. But it threw me off so badly, and I'm so sorry to Seer fans. At least they gave him sideburns, I guess. Editing spooky here, I can't find the clip, so I'm just gonna have myself explain it anyway. And if you don't know what a cheesecake joke is, it was basically a way to fat shame the actor for Masky or Tim. But Corbin was a kind of fresh air when it comes to main characters, especially a main character that plays an important role. Also, I really liked her character design, and I also think that making her indigenous was really cool because of how many white characters there are in creepypasta. I just think Scarecrow is objectively silly, and I think they and Corbin should kiss. Gotta remind myself, Pride Month is over, sorry guys. There were a few plot holes, but I don't think they're plot holes other than things that just didn't get to be expanded on, because you can tell the Seer was written out, at least most of the lore aspects, since they do hint at them. I did enjoy some long dialogue, even if some of it was pretty garbage, and yes, I know there was a reboot, but nothing really changed other than a bit of the dialogue and the voice acting got better. They changed Jeff's voice actor because something happened to the other. On my first watch, I couldn't focus on anything but the twinkification of Masky once again, but on my second, I could definitely see the appeal. With that, this is where I'll be closing the video. You know, this video was actually supposed to have more creepypasta dubs, and I had more lined up to talk about, but goddamn, this is so long. So perhaps I'll cover more in the future. I don't know, you tell me if that's what you want to see. Genuinely, thank you so much for watching. I really do put a lot of effort in my videos to make it enjoyable and look good, so if you would subscribe and like the video, that would help me a shit ton. Like I've said before, commenting will help me a lot, and I genuinely enjoy and try my best to read every comment, and I absolutely love hearing about people's experiences and their memories, and I just think it's so fucking cool. Also, please don't harass any of the creators or ask for more comics. That's just fucking weird and really annoying. As always, there will be links in the description to help Palestine. I've been Spooky here, and I cannot wait for my twink death.
Sun through the window, glass on the pane. I've been passing time, just doing my thing. I was out working, whole month straight, hit you